Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. And today I'm at this really cool shrine I found just here in the middle of Osaka, Japan. Unfortunately, it's closed off to the public. I went in here yesterday and there's a really cool, looks like a very ancient cemetery and some neat Shinto statues inside this shrine. I don't know if you can see any of the interior from outside here at the gates, but they are doing some kind of refurbishments, I think, to the place, so it's closed off today. I kind of snuck in last time, but I don't want to do that too many times because they are very strict out here, and I don't want to get in the wrong side of the law. But anyway, this got me thinking about concepts of Shintoism and Animism, which I think is a very important subject to bring up on this channel. I haven't really spoken much about it before, and it's something that comes to surface when you're in Japan and as you begin to observe what we would basically say is a Japanese spirituality, which is heavily rooted in Shintoism, which is a type of animism, and essentially it is the belief that within nature there are essences, whether that's in plants or animals or rocks or crystals or even in people, and this essence is kind of like a spirit in the truest sense of the word. So when we talk about spirits, when we talk about spirit people, sometimes we forget what that really means, and it doesn't mean that somebody's having a nice happy life on the other side. Oh look, gates open. You can see the inside now, the cemetery. It doesn't mean that it's a spirit person living in what we call like the astral realm. This spirit means the spirit or the essence of something. Okay, so really spirit means essence, and so the spirit of something is the feeling that you get from it. For example, what is the spirit of a particular forest that you really enjoy? You go into the forest, there's a certain mood, a certain energy, a certain vibe, and we can say that is the spirit or the essence of that forest. So how did spirit come to mean soul, or like the non-physical consciousness that embodies who we are? How did that change? Well, basically, I think that the terminology can be accurate to describe people as well, because every person you meet are themselves a spirit. Every person has an essence that is unique entirely to them. And I think sometimes we forget about that, or as I sometimes criticize New Age spirituality, because it de-emphasizes the individual, it de-emphasizes the person, and suggests going back into like this big amorphous soul blob, galactic soul soup. Well, I would say like animism and Shintoism reminds us that a person has a unique individual identity that is basically an essence of the universe. Now, in ancient Japan, they didn't believe that just anybody would become a spirit in this sense, or as they say, a kami. In ancient Japanese beliefs, usually it was somebody important, like an emperor. So an emperor might become a kami, and then the kami can then be worshipped. They can build statues about them, and they can venerate it. But just a bricklayer or a fisherman is unlikely to become a kami, unlikely to have that unique spiritual essence, I guess because they didn't deserve it. They were not important enough to have developed that level. Obviously, this is something I disagree with, because every single person is significant. Nobody is insignificant. And I think that particular belief is a perfect example of when like an ancient spiritual belief comes head to head with a superstition. So I always say this: just because a belief is ancient doesn't mean that it's correct. In fact, some of the most backwards beliefs you can imagine come out of ancient traditions, ancient religions. But of course, there's also elements of truth in many of these areas as well. So with kamis and animism, in Japan, you will find that there is a predominant spirituality, but it's interlaced with a kind of secularism as well. I think people are very open to topics like potentially consciousness outside the body, life after death, but I feel like it's been so blended with ancient traditions that it's a little bit difficult to define what that is. And I think that generally speaking, because of some of those ancient ideas about the kami, a lot of people in this society. Hi. Oh, it's kind of, that kid's like 3 years old. That's hilarious. She's walking around with an umbrella by herself. I think that because it's such a class-based system, that it's almost like, unless you're really important, then you have to earn the right to have an afterlife. Like that's the impression I get about Japanese culture. So I think an average person thinks that they're too low in the totem pole to be worthy of becoming a kami, to be worthy of becoming a spirit, becoming a divine essence. And of course, we know that that is pretty much an inaccurate assumption. Let's walk back this way a little bit. There's a little shrine over here. So when people worship, or when people pray in Japanese culture, I've noticed that it is again tied into those roots of animism and Shintoism. It's almost like praying to like the essence of the person, not the individual. There is no longer a sense that the person exists so much individually. It's more like the essence of who they are, what they believe. The feeling you get from them, the energy you get from them is now part of the universe and can be tapped into, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's literally an afterlife. So again, a lot of superstitious elements of that, not so much the objective evidence. But I want to talk about, before I wrap this video up, about the legitimate elements of basically animism. So personally, I found that the principles behind animism are very influential to me. Because it's the idea that there's a kind of there can be a spirit or an essence behind even things that we think are inanimate objects. And I think that's really interesting because it also relates to a lot of like spiritual stuff I've read about. I've read about how some argue that incarnations exist as any object, any material object that we think is lifeless is actually not lifeless, and could potentially contain some kind of a consciousness behind it, because everything is consciousness, everything is created by consciousness. So there's no such thing as a truly inanimate object. Everything has some kind of a life force behind it. And that's the essence of animism. And then with the astral projection stuff, I've talked to other people who do astral projection, and they've talked about how things like the fish in the aquarium, the coral in their aquarium, the nice crystal sitting on their shelf, that they've gone out of body and then they've seen like conscious like elements to those things. In one account I read, there was literally like this little fairy like diva or creature that was the essence or the conscious embodiment of some coral that were living in a fish tank. And the out-of-body traveler was able to communicate with this like fairy-like creature and identify why the coral in the fish tank was dying, because it needed more light coming in from like the halogen light bulbs above the tank. Like it wasn't getting enough light. Very interesting stories. I at this point I don't dismiss those types of things, because I've experienced so much in the out-of-body state and the astral traveling state that I don't have any reason to doubt, claims that for some people might be very difficult to buy into. but I'm sure that mystics and spiritual people have for, thousands of years been having experiences like that, and have been able to determine that even inanimate objects, even plants, even rocks may have not only a spiritual life force, an essence that you can feel or tap into, but it may have literal entities attached to those things that you can see on the astral spectrum. So you can't see on this wavelength, you go one wavelength up, and suddenly what to us looks like, I don't know, a bonsai plant. On that side, maybe there was like a fairy or some creature, or maybe there was a bit of conscious intelligence behind it that you can actually communicate to. So that's kind of the way reality actually is, which is everything is alive, everything has a conscious element, and many things have entire conscious kind of soul memory complexes that we'd call like an individual entity. But when it came down to Shintoism and Japanese Animism, I do think that there's a lot of elements to that which are pretty inaccurate from an objective level, but you will find aspects of those traditional beliefs all throughout modern Japanese society. Oh yeah, real quick, I'm glad you've gotten this far. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. Help keep this channel going. Hit that notification bell. Share the video if you like it. I guess those are all my thoughts about that, but something you can try as well is to meditate on an object, meditate on an atmosphere, meditate on a place, a plant, a piece of the forest that you like going to, a stream, a waterfall, and you'll come to find that everything has this kind of essence, something that is uniquely tuned to whatever that is. So the feeling you get from one piece of land in nature is not going to be the same as somewhere else, and being spiritually sensitive means being able to pick up on those types of things, being able to feel those different energies, and that's very enjoyable because we get to see the infinite diversity in life. So it's not just like life is just this mono existence of everything's the same. But like materialists believe, consciousness doesn't exist, it's not real, there's nothing special or different about anything. What animism teaches us is that everything's different, everything has an essence, we can tap into all of those things. So try it out for yourself and tell me what you think. Well, this is Cyrus. Thanks for coming to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. I guess I'll catch you guys in the next video. You can check out afterlifetopics.com. Check out my books like Understanding Life After Death, The Afterlife and Beyond. I have classes that run twice a week if you want to support the channel and help me to keep going with all this, because I can't live out of a backpack in hostels and at the same time being able to eat. So if you want to support the work I do and become a student, then hit me up on here, shoot me a message on Facebook. And what else? Any news, any updates? Well, I will be actually on the Roberta Grimes show again coming up at the beginning of next month. So if you like listening to Roberta Grimes, she has a very popular, very in-depth podcast about life after death, as well as quite a few books. So I will be going back on air with her. I think it might be a live cast. I'm not so sure. So that's going to be interesting. Of course, I'm still working on dissecting the Anthony Peake books. The Groundhog's Day guy who thinks that we all have to live the same life over and over again. What else? I've got some more podcasts, some more media stuff coming up. So I'm always working on something, and you can always stay in touch at Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, the Facebook group. Getting very big. We have just over 8,000 people in it now. So if you want to get involved in discussions, that's a good place to go. All right, enough rambling out of me. I'll catch you guys on the next video.